So this is a story about a crazy idea that Duane and I had. I've been teaching at the university for 20 years, and I've been really lucky because I never had to teach alone. I've always co-taught or taught in a team, and that's not usually what happens at the university. And when I've been teaching in a team, I get to take risks that I never would have taken if I had to teach alone. I've been on a mission to create the classroom of the future, a sustainable future, and it turns out that that's pretty risky business.
So when I think about the theme of TEDx identity, I think about how my identity became concrete when I was in architecture school. We'd be working with mentors and colleagues, working on ideas, talking about how to make them real. We'd be making things with our hands, and we'd be solving problems every single day. This was in a studio. It wasn't with desks in rows with someone sitting at the front. This was a kind of vibrant, energetic place. We learned how to think systemically. So when I think about the classroom of the future, I think about how I think it needs to be something like a studio. So Janet and I have been teaching like this for 10 years together. And in those 10 years, our students have been asking the same two questions over and over again. They want to know two things. They want to know how they can save the planet and then how they can earn a living doing it. So we were teaching a course one time, and Vancouver was launching an ideas contest, how to be the greenest city in the world. So we know that our students are asking these two questions, and we really believed that the 100,000 undergraduates in the City of Vancouver were probably asking these two questions too. So we went to coffee one day, and we talked about the idea that we would submit, and it was this. Our idea was to create a school devoted to these two questions. The contest got about 800 submissions. The citizens all voted on the best ones, and we won. It was amazing. The city manager, or the deputy city manager at the time, called us into his office. He gave us a set of keys, and he says, go for it. So here we are, ready to launch a school. We don't have a plan. We barely have a budget. We didn't write a report, and we didn't have to talk to a steering committee about what we were going to do. It was crazy, and it was exhilarating. So here we were doing this work for 10 years together, and we finally had the chance to go deep with our work.
So CityStudio was born. It's an innovation hub where students work directly with City, and they have to launch projects on the ground. Every day in the city they're doing this. The goal is to make the city healthier, greener, more sustainable. But what does that actually mean? It means it's a city full of joy. And we do two things there. We offer courses. You can take a course. And we also share the model with other cities. Cities are calling, wanting to build a CityStudio, and we help them do that. So we've been doing this for 4 years, and it turns out this is pretty radical for two reasons. The first is that the city is designed to offer stable, predictable services. You turn on the tap and your water runs. The garbage gets picked up. They fill the potholes. We all like that. It's beautiful. It gets done. It's not designed, though, to be creative and innovative and try new things. And that's where we come in. So we work with City Hall, but we're actually outside of it. So we're allowed to take risks and experiment where the city can't. The second reason that this is radical is that students typically are up on the hill, they're in lecture halls, they're writing exams, writing reports. They're not really focused on the city they're living in. And we think that students should be at the center. We trust them, and we get our students to make the course instead of take the course.
So how do we do our work? This classroom is quite different. We work with the students 5 days a week. They come to stay with us for 3.5 months, and we think of this as, it's like an exchange, but it's in their own city. It's kind of like an in-change. And the week looks like this. On Mondays, students learn design. They learn how to solve problems, they learn how to make things, they learn how to think systemically. And on Tuesday, they learn how to work in a project. What does it mean to actually do a project? How do you start well? How do you finish well? How do you plan all of the unpredictable things that can happen during projects? How do you plan? How do you deliver? And how do you launch something? Then on Wednesdays, we teach storytelling. This is helping students find their voice and then helping them use this voice in public on things that matter to them and things that matter to the cities. And then on Thursday, we do dialogue. Dialogue is about sitting in a circle, and we consider this quite a profound technology where students facilitate and they host guests from the community and from the city. They learn how to have conversations that matter, and more importantly, and most importantly maybe, they learn how to reflect quite deeply on what they're hearing, and they learn how to listen deeply. And then on Friday, because 4 days in the studio is enough, we send them out in the city on their bikes to explore.
And so, at the end of the course, they have to launch a project that solves a problem and get it on the ground. 80% of the world is living in cities now. Our universities are in cities, our students are in cities, and we think they need to come together to start thinking carefully about how we all live together, because we only have one planet. And as a city staff loves to say to the students, if you like problems, sure is a good time to be alive. So they have to think about all the problems that exist in the city and pick a project based on solving one. And the cities around the world are asking all the same kinds of questions.
Questions like, how do we build the communities we want to live in? People really love to garden, and people are really interested in how they can connect to their food and how we can do this together. So our students, architecture and landscape architecture students and environmental design students in this case, they built and designed something real for somebody real for the very first time in their university experience. And we know now that a garden shed is a perfect first building for a design student. It's very low risk.
How do we increase safety in our cities? We know that we have to get out of the car. As much as we all love the freedom of that, we need to get onto public transit. We need to get onto our trains and buses. But we also know that people don't always feel safe, especially women, and especially at night. And our students in a course realized this too, and they wanted to see if this was happening in the community. So they posted an online blog where you could put in stories of harassment on transit. Well, it turned out this was a major issue in the community. The blog went viral, the media called, and these students were at the center of this media frenzy. And the next thing you know, they're called in by the steering committee around safety and the Transit Commission, and they now sit on that board.
We ask questions like, how do we make the most of our public space? Public space is so precious, and with more and more of us living in cities, and with more and more of us living in smaller and smaller places, we have to figure out how the public realm can be our living room and it can be our backyards. So our students who feel this acutely, they created a public program by launching 10 pianos on the ground. I'm sure that many of you have seen them over the last couple of years. The program, the students doing this program, they handled everything. They handled the movers, they organized the tuning, they created community stewards, they managed the budgets. It's like an incredible opportunity to do like a major public program for the first time. And this kind of project shows them that they can do more than they imagined as possible. They then went on to go to business school and turn it into a venture. This past summer, they launched the project on the ground for a profit, and it's coming back this summer starting on Canada Day. That's right. Pianos.
So another key question, how do we create a zero-waste city? This is one of the toughest questions for the city because the city can't tell us to reduce our consumption, although that would be a great way to get to zero waste. What they can do is pull a policy lever and say at the landfill, we're not going to accept certain things anymore. So one of the upcoming bans is going to be around wood waste, and our students learning this policy in the classroom thought, what could we do? And they were filling a community need that asked for a recreational sharing library. This was a box made out of upcycled wood waste. It sits in a park, it has a lid, and you can share soccer balls and frisbees. A simple project. And afterwards, the course ended, and they decided, we're going to start a business. There's all this wood waste available, and you can now find them doing that and selling these pieces of furniture that are upcycled wood waste. So we've done 192 projects in 4 years, and we feel like we're just getting started. We're just starting to figure out how this works. And things are changing. The city is changing. The city manager loves to tell a story of riding his bike and passing the first experimental bike repair station that our students installed. And when he got there, he went to pump up his tire, and instead of pumping it up, it actually deflated. The pump was broken, the vandals had gotten at it, and as he walked his bike home, because he couldn't ride any longer, he thought, I'm so glad this is a CityStudio project and not a city one, because it's okay that students fail and make mistakes. We expect them to because they're learning. We need cities that learn. We need cities that make mistakes and experiment, and it's so great that we can work alongside them. Our universities are changing. This is a collaboration. They need to be embedded in community. They know that. They're working towards this, and this is the kind of collaboration that they're seeing happen. And finally, our students are changing. These are life-changing experiences for our students, and they're changed in ways that affect them for the rest of their lives. We see them kind of everywhere now. Now they're working at the city, they're working at Parks Board, they're on committees, they're running businesses in our community. And this is because they form relationships in their projects. And we always say to them that you can't get a good project unless you have good relationships. And these are high-quality networks that we think are building a new foundation in our city, and that's the city that we want to get to.
So we know that students can do extraordinary things and have extraordinary outcomes. And we know that they can do far more than we're asking them to do in their university classes, but they need to be deeply engaged. So we're going to ask a question here, which is a question Janet and I have asked thousands of times over the years. And the question is, under what conditions do you have your most engaged experience? So if you're like most people, it's probably the case that you haven't had your most engaged experience when you're sitting in front of a laptop. It's probably the case that you haven't had your most engaged experience when you're in a classroom or even on a campus. If you're like the rest of us, you probably had your most engaged experience when you're outside using your mind and your body together. You're probably struggling to do something real with other people, probably in a group. Your actions have consequences, and you have personal responsibility. This kind of deep engagement is so simple, and we think universities can be more like this.
So, if you want to get a CityStudio started in your city, you need three things. You need a place, you need rules, and you need champions. So the place, it's located outside the university and outside City Hall. We get to take off our typical hats, and we get to try on new ideas. And in many ways, we open our hearts and talk to each other as human beings and find new ways of being together in these kind of places. The second thing you need is rules. Things like go outside, do it in a group, do something real, move the dial on a city project, say yes. We are not very interested in the devil's advocate, and we do not invite naysayers to our party. And then we believe in our students. At a time when very few people are actually listening to what they have to say, we think they're the wisdom of the future. And we trust this process. And finally, we need champions. You need crazy people like us who spend a lot of time getting things like CityStudio off the ground. You need high-level academics, people that said yes to us, vice presidents. And you need progressive government. Mayors do matter. At a time when we see innovation hubs in companies, we think that City Hall should have innovation hubs.
So where are we headed? We know that students are looking for a generational mission that matters to the planet and matters to their lives. And we also know that we're going to spend trillions of dollars in the next decades building out our cities in response to climate and migration and food, air, water, waste, and unfortunately security now. We really think that this kind of work needs a kind of special focus. So we have an ask. Our ask is that if you're a university, well, let's start with cities. If you're a city leader or a manager that has staff, and you can invite students in to participate in your problems and participate in your challenges, we can guarantee that your staff will be more energized, they'll have more fun. We can guarantee that the staff expertise will be matched with the student passion. You'll be able to create something real, something different for the city. And then we can also guarantee that the media will write nice stories about you finally. And if you're a university leader, a president or a vice president or a dean, if you can create opportunities for your students to really work directly with city governments, we can guarantee that the student excitement will grow and that they'll be more deeply engaged in their learning, perhaps more deeply than ever. You'll attract and retain the best students. And we know with these skills and these kind of experiences, your students will get jobs. So this work is obviously very important to us. And after, we've taught on universities for 20 years, we've taught together for 10 years, we know that there are generations of students waiting to be switched on. And we think sometimes about how kindergarten was an idea that wasn't normal. And now we don't question it. It's everywhere, and it's just an accepted part of our culture. We think the same thing is true of CityStudio. We think one day, every city will have a CityStudio, and we won't be able to imagine the world without them. Thank you.
Thank you.